Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kentucky Small Business Development Center's weekly webinar. We're awfully glad you're here today. We'll allow a few minutes for attendees to join our event, and we'd like to share a little bit of information about the Kentucky Small Business Development Center. We are the only statewide nationally accredited program that provides entrepreneurial and business development services. The Kentucky SBDC plays a vital role in the Commonwealth's economic development by assisting entrepreneurs at every stage of their business life cycle. For almost 40 years, Kentucky SBDC has assisted emerging and growing businesses by providing professional expertise, tools, and information necessary to make sound business decisions in a complex and ever-changing marketplace. We do this at no cost to our clients, all thanks to the U.S. Small Business Administration, which is then administered by the University of Kentucky, who also partners with regional universities, colleges, and local economic development agencies. We're also part of a national network, America's SBDC, with over 1,000 SBDC centers across the nation. To learn more about us, please visit kybizhelp.com, and there you'll find additional resources to help fund, start, and grow your business. And to request personal assistance, email us at info@kybizhelp.com or give us a call at 1-888-475-7232. A recording of today's webinar will be emailed to you later this afternoon. And if you take a look to the right of your screen, you'll find the chat feature. So as we go forward, if you have any questions, we'll answer them there at the end. And so if you would, just go ahead and give it a try and tell us how you're doing today, where you are. And we'd like to hear from you. I'm Dave Etkin. I'm the director here at the Louisville Small Business Development Center. We're part of 13 other centers located across the Commonwealth that make up the Kentucky Small Business Center Network. And today, I'd like to welcome a great guest, Courtney Sandora, who is the founder and owner of Go Social Digital Agency. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about influencer marketing, which is a new and maybe different way that most, maybe some of our small business haven't really thought about. But Courtney is a great resource. She has a huge wide range experience. She started with the large advertising firms in the Northeast in New York and Chicago, and landed here in Louisville at Brown-Forman and decided to launch her own business. And so she's taken all that big city, big agency knowledge and brought it down to the small business. So with that, I'd like to say hello, Courtney, and maybe we'll just get started here.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Well, thank you for the introduction, and thank you so much for joining. I think influencer marketing is a term that a lot of people have heard, but they may not quite fully understand. It is a term that I'm personally really passionate about. My background, I like to say I'm equal parts PR and social media. And influencer marketing to me is really that intersection between traditional media and then social media. And so we'll get more into that. Today, I'm going to explain to you, how you can use influencer marketing for your business. What is an influencer? And we're going to touch a little bit both on B2C and B2B. When COVID first hit, I think like everybody, I was thinking, how can I make myself, better? What can I add? How can I pivot? And I've been doing influencer marketing for 4 years. I've had my agency for a little over from 10 years. And so I decided to really take the leap, create a division solely focused on influencer marketing called IPG, Influencer PR Group. And I dedicated resources, software, and really said, I'm going to take this leap because I believe in influencer marketing. We also have a podcast too. So if you listen to this and you want to learn more about it, it's called Eat, Drink, Social. And it is anywhere you can get your podcast. But we interview influencers. So if you kind of want to hear firsthand from people about, how did you get your start? How do you like working with brands? That's a great resource just to kind of hear their stories. And that's why we started it. So getting into what is influencer marketing, a lot of times when you say influencer, people think Kim Kardashian, right? You go to these people that you might have heard of, even some negative stuff like the influencer who faked her engagement so she could get free stuff for her wedding. Over the last few years, influencers, definitely some of them have given kind of the area of a bad name per se. But the good news is they're, just like anything, they're people you want to work with and people you don't. And I would say for most of us, getting Kim Kardashian is pretty unattainable because of budget reasons, but B, it's not even someone that you really would benefit your business, right? Like you really want to think when you're working with influencer marketing, what is the geography? Who do I want to tap and the industry that you want? So don't worry about, this kind of celebrity influencer so much. What I want to talk to you today is more about local influencers. So I pulled 3 folks here that we've worked with in the past. These are all Kentucky based, but you can find influencers anywhere, right? In any market or in any industry. And so, you might not traditionally have thought of someone as an influencer, but as social media morphs, these people really do have influence, and we'll go into that. Just as an example, JC is someone, he was our first podcast interview actually. And he's just someone who liked to write about cooking, liked to write about the food that he was eating at restaurants. And so to not bother his friends with too many food pictures, he launched his own channel called JCP Eats. And it morphed into a place where not only could he talk about food and restaurants, but he also talked about body positivity, his journey with weight loss he's talked about. And so, by being vulnerable, he's been able to connect with audiences, and he's been able to score deals with Kroger. I know we've worked with him with Ale81, which is a Kentucky soft drink company. And you can even see him now on the local news. He does some regular segments on Wave News. So while a lot of these folks have used influencer marketing, it usually starts off kind of as a side gig. Some people have been able to morph it into their full-time career. I would say most of the time people are doing it as like a side passion, and they usually focus around things that they're interested in. So the middle gentleman, Josh, he does a lot of around fashion and lifestyle. I've seen, some hotels in Chicago bring him in for like a sponsored post. And so these are the types of people I'd like you to think about when you are looking to push your brand or your service, or get people to an event. It's less Kardashian and more the people that are more on the local level, who your customers probably connect with and trust more often. So what is an influencer? In a short piece, an influencer basically is someone who has the influence to make someone buy something, someone use a service, someone attends an event. So, and there's reasons why they're influential. People trust them. We'll go into that. But it is a new space. It's constantly morphing. You might have heard of the term micro-influencer. And then a few years ago, the New York Times came out and they coined the phrase nano-influencer. And so you have these different levels of influencers, and everyone's trying to kind of figure the category out as it goes. It is still pretty new. Typically, these types of influencers are broken down by the number of followers, right? But, don't dismiss someone because they are a nano influencer. Sometimes they can have the best engagement rate, the most power with your customers. And so, you want to kind of look at the goal of your campaign, and we'll talk about that. But the type of person you work with should match up with the goal of your campaign. So if I'm going to really go for wide awareness, I might want someone with more followers. But if I want to do something with engagement, like driving people to a website, maybe these micro influencers or nano influencers are the way to go. So that's just kind of if you've heard those terms, they're usually based on the number of followers. And the more followers you have, people can argue the more you can charge a company for paid posts. And we'll talk about paid and trade as well. So why influencers? I think if you're not someone on Instagram who's scrolling regularly, this idea of really trusting someone could be kind of odd. But for people who do follow these influencers, they kind of feel like they're their friends in a way, right? So they're looking at their lifestyle, they trust them. Maybe it's aspirational and they have this, everything they do is like beautiful outfits in a beautiful home. And they think, wow, I want to, be like that person. And then other times it's just they connect with them on a certain topic. So as I mentioned, JC, and he was being very vulnerable about his journey with body positivity. So maybe there's kind of a trust that's built there. But overall, people really trust these influencers. And because of that, it's more powerful than a paid ad. And people will actually take the next step to buy something because of an influencer. There's a lot of different, I pulled a couple stats here, but there's a lot of different stats out there that really show, I bought something, or I attended an event, or I used a service because this person that I follow on social said it was a great idea. And then the other thing is they have good reach, right? Usually people are influencers because they do have people following them. They do have good engagement. And in a world where we're seeing more people using ad blockers, and we're seeing the organic news feed being hidden, so like posts on your brand page being hidden, these influencers are a great way to kind of get around that, because they have good engagement, they pop up in the news feed quite a bit. So a lot of people say that they discover a new brand or product. And, I was talking to my own team about it the other day, and I said, when's like the last time you bought something because you saw it on Instagram? And almost all of them said, within the month they had seen something on Instagram from, an influencer, and then looked into it and bought it. So it really does work. So one of the reasons I created an influencer division for my company is when you look at the trends of marketers and where they're spending their budget, nearly 50% of marketers said that they're going to increase their spend on influencer marketing in 2021. And they're doing this to raise brand awareness, to reach new audiences, to improve brand advocacy. And it's just an area that's growing, that people are interested in, that people are investing in. And it's an area that I truly feel works. When social first started, I was like, oh, this is so exciting because you can just tell your story whenever you want. You don't have to convince a journalist to tell it. But then it kind of, became clear that when you post something on your own brand page, you're kind of preaching to the choir, right? You're talking to people who already know about your brand or your product or your service. When you get an article in, let's say, the Courier Journal in Louisville, that's a nice broad reach of awareness. But where influencers are the sweet spot is, you're reaching someone on social. It's easier to get a hit with an influencer, I would argue, than an editor at a newspaper. But yet you're still exposing your brand or your business to a new audience. So in my mind, it's kind of the best of both worlds, right? You're getting that awareness, you're getting that third-party endorsement. But it's also easier to get than getting a feature. Like the Courier is only going to write about you once or twice a year, right? Like you're not going to convince them to cover you regularly. But the opportunities with influencers are much more broad. There's more influencers out there. We look at, publications in Louisville, like Insider Louisville closed down. I think I read that Louisville Magazine was scaling back. And it's not a great time to be a journalist right now. Newsrooms are shrinking. And so in a way, these influencers, whether you like it or not, and I'm a formerly trained journalism student from Indiana University. And so, I can say that these influencers may not be as classically trained as a journalist, but whether you like it or not, they are the ones that are sharing information at times, right? So, you could think of them as the restaurant critic, or talking about new brands. And so they do have a lot of value there. And, more and more marketers are turning to influencers because they're seeing an ROI. And we'll talk a little bit about how to measure that ROI. It's not perfect, but it should be a goal when you set up a campaign. So how do you interact with an influencer? Because I have a background in PR, for me, interacting with an influencer is pretty natural, right? It's like pitching a journalist. When you reach out to these influencers, they know why you're reaching out, right? So if you're a brand, there's kind of this unspoken word that if you're going to offer them something to try, or if you're going to say, hey, stop by my restaurant or try this service, it's like this understanding that in exchange that they will probably post about it, right? It's this unspoken thing. Now, some people are worried, well, what if they hate it, or what if they never post? And I will tell you, 9 times out of 10, people do pull through with some kind of post. I've had a handful of occasions where someone said, I went to that restaurant client of yours, I really didn't care for the food, so I'm just not going to post at all. And that, that happens. But honestly, like, that's the best case. I don't really want someone posting something negative, right? And I don't think these influencers really are out to get companies or brands, because, in my case, if they posted something really bad about a brand that we work with, you can be sure that I'm probably not going to go back to them for other clients. And so they want to have a good working relationship with a brand. So there's really 2 different ways that you can approach them. You can approach them for trade for mention. We do a lot of that. I think to me, it's in part my PR background. And so, I'll reach out to someone, I'll say, hey, I've got this great, whiskey client, and would you like to try their brand? And they'll usually respond back, yeah, that's great. Here's my address. We'll send them some whiskey, and then, in a couple of weeks, we'll end up seeing some content on their page. If we don't, sometimes it takes a little bit of follow-up. But in that case, when you're doing a trade for mention kind of exchange situation, I find it's more authentic. It usually is lower in cost than advertising. The downside of that is you don't have a lot of control. So if I was paying someone and said, hey, post about my whiskey brand, I could say, these are the things I want you to mention. This is how many posts I want. And I'd have a lot more control of the content. And so if you're looking to have like a longer term relationship with an influencer, sometimes paid is really the way to go, right? But if you kind of want to create like a grassroots moment for a product, the trade for mention sometimes can be the way to go. And it's simply just offering up a free product, a service, a ticket to an event, and in exchange, they'll pay you back with some coverage on their channel. So I'm going to show you an example here of a brand that we work with. They're a startup out of Charleston, South Carolina. They're called Toadfish Outfitters. They have several different products, but one of the products that's the best-selling product is what they call the can cooler. So you stick it, it was originally designed for boating. You can stick it on a boat, and you can easily pull it up and take a drink. And people have been using this on their, surfboards, on their riding mowers. And so we really wanted to get it in the hands of people to create buzz on social. And, the can cooler, I think, retails for around $25. It certainly doesn't cost that to make it. So this was a pretty inexpensive way for this company to get a lot of buzz. So I'm going to just show you a quick clip here. We want.
This is probably the coolest thing ever. So you pick it right up, right? What?
It's all safe and sound in this toadfish holder. This thing is crazy. Look at that. So crazy. Love it.
So that was, that was just an example. In that campaign, we targeted both beer accounts, because obviously you can stick beer in this can cooler, and we also targeted outdoors folks. And they wanted to do a little bit more daredevilish. So we tapped into TikTok in addition to Instagram, and we'll talk about kind of what network to choose. But in those cases, all of that was just, hey, would you like to try out this can cooler? And then we didn't put any boundaries on this is the type of content you have to create. So we didn't tell the guy, you need to take your surfboard and surf over it. They just came up with that. And that's the thing too, like normally with these influencers, they're an influencer because they do create creative content. So you don't necessarily have to give them always a ton of direction. If you're willing as a brand to kind of let go of that control a little, sometimes I feel like the content will surprise you. So what makes a good campaign? If you get off this webinar today and you think, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do an influencer campaign, here are things that you should think about. So especially when you're looking at a brand or a company, you need to think about your values and you need to work with influencers that match up with that. So we work with Ale81, as I mentioned. This woman, she is very down to earth. She's got a very warm personality. You can see she's like in her PJs here, and it fits Ale8, right? Ale8 is just, it's a very warm, friendly brand. Like if I had someone with a mohawk in that picture, it would feel like a disconnect probably. So you want to really look at, who is your brand and who aligns with your brand when you're choosing who to work with. Don't just work with anyone because they say yes, right? Like you want it to be the right person. And when you're starting a goal or starting a campaign, think about your goal. Is your goal awareness? If your goal is awareness, then pick someone that has a good size following. If your goal is engagement, like driving people to a website or to take an action, you want to pick someone who has decent engagement rate too. And you can tell their engagement rate by how many, likes they get, how many comments they get, and look at the comments. Make sure that the people that are commenting are real people, right? Like it's not just a bot saying, something that doesn't even make sense on the post. And a lot of people would argue that engagement is really more important than reach. So they said, this quote says, engagement is the new impressions, and it matters. And it does. I would much rather have someone with 5,000 followers who cause, 20 sales than someone with 1 million followers who cause 10 sales. And so you want to look at all of those different elements. In this case, this was again, Toadfish. They do fishing rods. One of their big things is put them back. They're huge on environmental issues. They replant 10 square feet of oyster beds for every product sold. And so, when we look at influencers too, we want to make sure, this isn't someone who's throwing beer cans into the water, that their values do align and they're living that kind of lifestyle too. So again, that's really important to make sure the values align. Then you want to be able to measure. So this was the woman that I showed you that we worked with Ale earlier. We use the software Upfluence. There are several software programs out there, but the beauty of some of these software programs is they really show you a peek behind the curtain. So they show you where this influencer's followers are, the age group, the demographic. This particular software even says, are their followers real or are they bots? This is determined 97% of our followers are real. It also gives you a suggested price based on the average engagement rate and their reach. So for this woman, they said the suggested price would be $415. And this is a great tool to have. So if you reach out to an influencer and they come back to you and say, you know what, I only do paid opportunities, you can go back to a tool like this. If she came and said, you need to pay me $800 for a post, I could say, no, that's not really the market value. So this really kind of helps you determine, if you were going to do paid, how much should you do? And a lot of these influencers, the ones that are a little bit more savvy and have been doing it longer, they'll have media kits, just like a publication would. So you can ask them, even if I know my client is not really into the paid opportunity, I always just get the media kit just to see, what is their going rate? What's their ask? How does it compare to other people? So you definitely, having a software like this is great because you can learn more about the influencer before you kind of make that deal. But you also want to measure on your end. So, when they post, make sure you're looking, is there more referral traffic that day? If you're an e-commerce company, can you give them a a code that's specific to them so that you know that their followers were the ones that actually made a purchase. So there are some ways that you can measure it. And sometimes when it's just an awareness campaign, I mean, you know, it's not always a perfect deal. It's kind of like PR. You can't always tie it to everything, but I think you should try. And especially if you're trying to defend to your boss or make a case to do influencer marketing, you want to make sure you can measure some ROI. But I can tell you, you know, when an influencer posts versus like posting on your own brand page, I definitely see the needle move more when it's on an influencer's account. And you also want to look at the right network, right? So Instagram is definitely the darling when it comes to influencer marketing. This, you know, a ton of people are using it. I think that's by nature because it's more visual, and it's kind of where influencers were born in a way. But, you know, as the example I showed you with the can cooler, we were trying to reach a little bit, you know, of some kind of like hipper, fun, young crowd. And so we went to TikTok, and I believe you're going to be seeing TikTok more and more. But you just want to make sure, like, if you're trying to reach an older audience, then maybe Facebook is the way to go. And if you want to reach women, you know, look at Pinterest. But really, Instagram's kind of where a lot of the influencer activity is happening. YouTube, you'll see too. Definitely, that's a great place, but Instagram is the majority. Now, if you're going to do a B2B play, I'd say Twitter and LinkedIn is a good place to start. And we're going to go more, I'm going to go into like the B2B right now, but for B2C, I would say Instagram's kind of the go-to place, with YouTube and TikTok kind of second coming behind. So B2B, we happen to do a lot of food and beverage clients, but we have done some B2B, and it is still possible to do influencer marketing for B2B. I think one of the strategies is to become an influencer yourself, right? And Gary Vee, as somebody who has a digital agency, he also sells wine. He has a variety of different businesses, and he's just done an amazing job at selling himself and positioning himself as an influencer. You know, he does videos, he does thought leadership pieces, but he puts himself out there. So you should think, you know, is there anyone in your organization that you could position as a thought leader or as an influencer? I recently got an introduction to Paul, who's in Louisville, and he does saltwater woody rum, I believe is what it's called. But anyway, he has been doing some really interesting things on LinkedIn. I would suggest that you connect with him. And, you know, this was a case where he did this quick little video of, you know, this is a wrap up of my 2020. And honestly, like, some of the stuff was really positive, like, oh, we saw these great sales. And then he also talked about the downside too. And I thought, you know, this was a great video. He was making himself vulnerable as a business owner. And I think it got over like 10,000 views. So you don't have to be like on the speaking circuit to be an influencer in the B2B world. You just have to get creative, and you have to be willing to put yourself out there. Me personally, that's a goal of mine for 2021. So, you know, I would challenge yourself, look at your organization and think, who could be a good influencer in your organization? And then finally, like, if you aren't somebody who wants to put yourself out there, this is Rebecca. She works with us a lot on photography for clients, creating social content. But, you know, she is somebody that I really don't see, she's a complementary partner, right? Like, I don't see her as a threat to my business. I see her as a partner, and we constantly support ourselves. So she's always, you know, engaging with us on social. We're spotlighting her on our social. So look at people in your business network that are good referrals of business, good partners, and ask yourself, like, how can you help promote one another? And you know, really tap into your network to amplify your social reach. And even if there's someone that you really admire in your industry, but you've not really had a reason to reach out to them, think about engaging them in a way of putting them on your podcast, asking them to write a guest thought leadership piece. You'll see a lot of people with the shutdown doing these live streams like Instagram Live, where you can split the screen and you can interview them on social. And then the other thing to really do too is, while Facebook reach is drastically decreasing, Facebook groups are great too. So think about how you could be a thought leader in a LinkedIn group or a Facebook group. And then, a lot of times, like Rebecca and I are both in the same networking group on Facebook, and she'll support my posts. When I post, she'll be liking and commenting, and I support her. So again, like even within those groups, having that partner can help boost your influence for sure. So those are the main topics that I wanted to cover. I hope, I'm definitely here for questions, and I hope that gives you kind of an idea of how you as a brand or a business can use influencer marketing. I think it's only going to be a tool that's going to grow as we look in the few years ahead. So I would definitely suggest that you look into it. So there's my information too, if you want to reach out. And my website is goforthbesocial.com.
Nice. Thank you, Courtney. Yeah, we've got a bunch of questions today. I guess I'll just kind of summarize several. How do you find influencers if you're just getting started? We've had several questions.
Yeah.
Especially if you want to find a micro influencer. How would you start?
So there's a couple different ways. Instagram's a great way to kind of discover these influencers. So let's say you're rolling out a product in Nashville and you're like, how can I find this person in Nashville? A big way that if you don't have the software, because the software allows you to search for people. But if you don't have the software and you just want to do it down and dirty, a great way that you can do is look at different hashtags. So we do a lot in the food and beverage industry. And so there's like different hashtags like Nashville Eats. And so we'll click on that. And then on Instagram, you can see the top posts. And usually the top posts, you start to see the same names over and over. And you see, oh, wow, this person's posting about restaurants a lot. And they have a lot of great engagement. And they're based in Nashville. So you want to make sure that you're not just picking someone who went to Nashville on vacation. You want to make sure it's someone who lives there, if that's the market you're trying to do. So a lot of it is kind of digging within social. And the other interesting thing is all these influencers interact with one another. So they kind of have this, just like I was talking about the photographer, how she supports me, the foodies in one market will support each other. Excuse me. So you'll start to see like comments from the same people, and you can almost kind of build out this circle of network of people who are all the foodies, and they use the same hashtags. They like each other's posts. And I start to track, and we have a whole database. We just use like a Microsoft Excel type of situation, but start to write them down. And that's a great way to discover folks.
Have you ever had an influencer just like tell you no, that they're not interested in?
Sure. Yeah. All the time. Usually it's, usually the no's are I'm too busy, or, if somebody like hasn't posted that they're pregnant on there and we're trying to pitch, spirits, they're like, well, actually I'm pregnant right now. Not a good time. So there's things like that. And then sometimes people say, I only do paid ops, and again, get their media kit, ask them what it takes, because you never know in the future that they might be a good fit. And I will tell you, it's a wild west when it comes to payment. You get people that are asking for $10 and $10,000. I mean, because it's such a new industry, there's really not a good standard. And again, that's where like those software tools help you kind of wrap your arms around that and say, this is what they're worth.
Yeah, I really like that. I mean, that it's so important to, even to track any ROI on any money you spend on marketing or advertising. So that was a good step. I appreciate that one. Let's see. So are there some industries that I guess you are not willing to work for?
Well, I've done booze, so there's that. I haven't come across something Like I said, we've done a lot of food and beverage, and usually there's nothing that scandalous about those. So,
Right.
yeah, no, I haven't really come across that. I mean, I will say that, I will say that influencer marketing tends to work better in certain industries, right? So you'll see a lot of travel influencers, you'll see fitness influencers, food and beverage folks. So kind of that lifestyle, it tends to work better in.
Mm-hmm. And there's a couple questions about using influencers B2B. It sounds like that's a little bit different animal, maybe a bit more difficult.
Yeah, I would say it is. It's more of a thought leadership play than it is just, hey, let me send this person a bottle of whiskey. To me, you have to kind of put a little bit more effort into it, really build up those relationships. But at the end of the day, it's kind of networking online, right? And I remember with our podcast, JC's great. He has a lot of local influence in Kentucky, but on my radar there was the apartment bartender, and he does deals with like West Elm and all these like huge brands. I'm like, oh, will we ever get the apartment bartender? And the interesting thing is, once you get one connection at quote unquote like a certain level, you start to get more people that are like, oh, you had the apartment bartender on, okay, I'll do yours, And so I think the same thing is with like B2B networking. Like if you can kind of get into that one person, if you have things that are tiered kind of level, then you can start to get into this network of people that say, oh, you talked to that person, okay, I'll work with you too. I'll do a guest blog post or whatever.
Yeah. I guess I ought to say that to everybody that JC Phelps is also a coach here at the Kentucky Small Business Development Center. So if you want to reach out to JC, just you can find him on ksbdc.org. There's our list of all our centers there. So check that out. And I've actually used him myself on one of our business. We had a contract with him in the past. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
Let's see. There's a question about the Upfluence software. Are there others? Where do you find? What's the best? Is that the only one that you recommend?
So I did a ton of research on software, and there are others, which of course I'm blanking on their names. Like Tracker is a popular one. It's 2 A's. I did a ton of digging on pricing. Unfortunately, like a lot of software companies, they don't make it easy to find their pricing. Yeah. And I can tell you that Upfluence was the most affordable one which I think comparable features. And so if you are a small business, that's one to look into. I do think that they just recently put out a free tool too. It's like a Chrome plugin. Mm-hmm. And so you can put that as a Chrome plugin and then hover over any Instagram account, click on it, and it'll show you some stats on that person. So, which is someone who is paying for the software. I was like, hey, wait a second, why am I paying for this now? But the paid version does have the kind of search tool, right? So it has the database, which makes it easy. So I can go in there and just say, I'm looking for people in, Indianapolis that cover this topic, and it'll spit out a list.
Okay. Debbie'd like to know if you have any suggestions for nonprofits that need attention to fundraise and advocate.
Yeah, so I think that goes back to the whole idea of values. If you can find someone who's passionate about your nonprofit or has personal experience with it, then I think your whole campaign is going to come out a lot more authentic. So I guess I would look at who's already involved with your organization, maybe has been involved in the past, and do they have a good social following? Tap them. But then just also look at whatever your nonprofit is there somebody locally that, and maybe it's going to take reaching out to these people and say, here's my cause. Is this something you're passionate about? But a lot of people, especially for a nonprofit, I'll tell you, when COVID hit, we actually, and this is not a nonprofit, but we had a restaurant client in Florida, and, everyone was feeling bad for restaurants, right? As they've suffered a lot. Mm-hmm. And all these influencers who normally said in Orlando, oh, I'll only do paid opportunities, they all donated their time, did a ton of posts. And so, for a nonprofit, I could see influencers saying, you know what, this is a great cause. I'm going to do this for free and support you. But I would just say, make sure it's a good fit. Make sure, ideally they do feel passionate about the cause.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I guess when we were talking before you came on, we were really talking about, what your message is, your archetype, and I guess you would use that as a first step to kind of decide where you would go in the influencer, to find the correct influencers. And
yeah, just look at your brand and make sure that, ideally the influencers you work with are someone that would be your customer, right? Because the people following them probably are similar to them. So if the influencer is someone that might be your customer or is an existing customer, then most likely their followers kind of would be a good target too.
Mm-hmm. Looks like that's about all the questions we have.
Okay. Well, don't hesitate to reach out if you all have any questions. I'm happy to share my experience and answer anything if something comes to mind later.
Yeah. So again, just a reminder, we will send everybody a recording today. And but before we go, Lisa just popped in and says she's in the early stages of selling her product, and she has the website and the product. That is, what's the first step that she should take to get started?
So in terms of influencer marketing, I would look at your products, ask yourself, where are you selling this? So is there a geography that you want to kind of narrow in on, or is it a more of a lifestyle thing? So like we worked with a sangria brand that was, it had wine in it, but it was $14, right? So we wouldn't want to target influencers who were wine snobs. We were targeting people about easy entertaining, and they sold nationwide. So in that case, it was less about, hey, I want to find people in Nashville. And it was more about, I want to find people with this mindset who would use the product. So kind of narrow down, who are you going after? And then I would go on social and find those people. And again, a lot of ways that we use are through hashtags. And once you find one person, you'll start to find the others all linking, because they do all kind of congregate online. So that's what I would say. Just kind of determine, who's the ideal customer, and then find an influencer online that kind of embodies that. Nice.
Thank you, Courtney. This has been great. I've really enjoyed this. This has been super fascinating. So I hope you'll come back and do something else for us again. You were awesome.
Oh, thank you. I'd love to. Yeah.
Well, again, thanks, Courtney, and thanks everybody for coming today for our weekly webinar. We'll be back next week and with another hot topic on SBA loans and PPP. So big day next week. But again, have a great Wednesday. We'll see you next week. Thank you again, Courtney. It's been awesome.
Yeah.
And thanks everybody for being here.